touching on the top prop bets in the NBA today. All right, so taking a look at today's board, it is a typical Monday morning board in which it's very tight. There's not that many appealing props just yet. Now, NBA-wise, there are a lot of injury situations that could really change the whole dynamic of the slate, and I'll touch on that throughout this video. We are getting like two interesting props when comparing underdog and prize picks that I'll get into, and there are some interesting fantasy score props that we are getting on today's slate, so it does seem like that's going to be the approach that we're going to be attacking tonight's slate with. Do want to start out with the NHL because there were three props in which were really sticking out to me in terms of odds. And I want to start out with the most interesting one that we're getting. So the average sportsbook odds have this number set at 3.5 under shots on goal. And it's like minus 170 for under 3.5 shots on goal. Yeah. And using DK Sportsbook as an example, minus 175. Like crazy there. If we pull it up on Underdog, we can see this number is set at 3. So there is something just weird about this prop line. I just kind of wanted to call it out. To me, it seems like the line should be set at 3, and that's why Underdog has it set at 3. So it could be a situation in which you're betting him to finally get over. Obviously, he hasn't been over there in 5 straight games. Just want to call that one out. It was a very, very interesting prop line. And now the next two I'm going to call out are going to be ones in which are not aligning with what DraftKings Sportsbook has, but on average, about minus 143 for the over for Evan here. Now we can see DraftKings Sportsbook has it closer to minus 125. So probably not one I'm really chasing too much. And then another one, it's minus 130 for the over 2.5 shots on goal. And this one on average across the Sportsbook is minus 143 as well. So a decent prop line that we're getting here. Not perfect though. Now looking at NBA, there are 3 bets that I just want to touch on to start out with, or really 4, I guess. I'll start with Tyler Hero. So Tyler Hero's fantasy score is set at 34. If we look at his fantasy score on Underdog, we can see we're getting about a 0.5 edge. You know, that is something that might not seem significant, but it is something that can really add up throughout the long term if we're chasing these one way or the other. Let's see if there is a way in which we should be chasing this. All right, so if we look at it as well, we can see his projection is about 35.62. So if we are wanting to place this bet for the over, which is being favored right now, and if we look at his projection and the Vegas line, it would suggest that we should bet the over on Underdog. That is a very small edge. It's definitely not a lock and load, but it does get a pretty good matchup going against Utah. Now the biggest edge difference that we seem to be getting is going to be looking at Mike Conley. So on Underdog, his prop line is set at 25.65 fantasy points. If we pull it up on DraftKings Sportsbook, we are getting about a full point difference in fantasy score at 26.5. That to me is a big edge. Yeah, he has a matchup with Atlanta. So let's figure out where we should be betting this, over or under, and on which site. So for what it's worth, this is kind of the new data point that I put in there. It's going to be kind of what their line would be if we were to take the averages from all their individual props. So the line would be set at 25.48. So we would see that the under is being favored if we were to look at it that way. And it'd be heavily favored for the under there. Now, if we look at his projection, it's going to be slightly different. His projection would suggest that it should be slightly over. To me, that seems like a situation in which we probably would just want to stay away from. But it is also a situation in which maybe we do a little bit of a hedge where we would bet the over on Underdog, which would be fine. Then we could also do the under on Prize Picks. And let's just say you're doing a 2-leg bet, like maybe just 1 2-leg bet on each site, and you feel like you have a lock with the other one that's very similar. Obviously, if one of those hit, then you're profiting on the day. And so just want to call that out. Is kind of a little bit of a discrepancy there. I'm actually curious about that game. Let's take a grander peek at it. So last game against Brooklyn, 41 minutes. Against Philly, that was a blowout, only 24 minutes. So for the most part, he should be right around getting the over there, especially with Minnesota. Has been playing much better with them. Let's look at the game over and under. Projected to be a high-scoring game, close game. I would probably favor the over. So I would probably go towards Underdog, betting the over on under. Because as long as the game stays close, he should be getting around 30 or so minutes. And if that happens against Atlanta in this high-scoring game, you would think that he'd be able to get over. And now we have another very interesting one. It's going to be looking at Jalen Green's fantasy score. So it's currently set at 31.5 on Prize Picks. And if we look at on Underdog, 30.15. So I guess this is going to be the biggest difference that we're getting, about a 1.4 edge either way, depending on where the projection is suggesting we go with this. Now let's take a look at the game. This could be a game in which has blowout risk. It does. 12.5 points is what Boston is favored by. So I would say the first thing we would have to do is take a look at his minutes in games that have been blowouts recently. Okay, so against Brooklyn, still got 37 minutes. Against the Spurs, a team that they were blowing out, 27 minutes. So we'd want to maybe more look at this, games that are blowouts that he's played in recently, which is tough because he's been a little bit banged up. And so another one against Memphis, 29 minutes. Against Denver, 19, but that was when he was coming back from injury. So not a proper indication, I guess, of what his minutes could be. And so we will take a look at his projection here in a second, because to me, it kind of just seems like his minutes are going to be locked into around 33, let's just say. And we'll see what he's projected to get minutes-wise. Now, I do want to point out, like, Kevin Porter Jr. is going to be back as well. To me, his fantasy score also seems low. Remember, he was kind of like their star player at the beginning of the season. And he is someone that last game finally saw a full allotment of minutes. It seemed like they're going to cap his minutes really until the rest of the season. Well, that did not happen last game. He actually got 34 minutes. And so that could create something interesting as well. So look at the fantasy score here. So once again, with Jalen Green, they are kind of, if we were to pull in all of his individual props, pull that into an average, they'd be favoring the under. And the under would be with the line at 32.3. Now, he's basically projected to get 32.5. So not a big edge either way here. And he is projected to get right around 34 minutes. Based off of the matchup, he should be right around there. Based off his average minutes times his average fantasy score, projected to get over it. So everything is suggesting that he should be over. And so with that, this is another one of those situations in which, by process of elimination, we'd probably want to bet the over here for Jalen Green against Boston, over fantasy points. But as we can see, we do have a lack of bets that are really standing out as lock and load bets. That just seems to be the trend on Mondays, guys. I don't know what it is. Maybe there's less sports going on and whatnot. It just seems to be strange where, like, literally, it seems to be a trend. Like Monday starts here, Tuesday a little bit easier, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's like a build, and then just drops off on Monday. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a mental thing for me. I don't really know, but it seems to be much easier Thursday through Sunday than it is, let's just say, Monday through Wednesday. Do you want to call out Kevin Porter Jr.? Mentioned he's getting more minutes. If he is going to be getting more minutes, then he should start to be able to get over this a little bit more frequently. Okay, and so maybe that's why the sportsbooks are starting to favor Jalen Green as the under fantasy point prop. So now the last one that I want to call out is going to be Curry here. So we can see on Underdog, they are favoring a little bit more of the lower props for some reason. Okay, for Curry, it's 62.5, and it's not going to be a big edge, but on PrizePicks, they have it set at 34.5, so almost a full point there. Going against Phoenix, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, going to be an appealing game, maybe a game in which you could potentially run out a stack. Let's look at the game over and under there, 4.5, 236 over and under, a pretty appealing game there to me. So once again, let's pull up his props, and maybe we'll finally get one in which highly correlates between the odds and everything. We'll see. All right, so here we go. This is basically a push here. All right, nothing too alarming there. Let's see what the line is set at 44. Sorry, suggesting that maybe the over here. And so once again, we could be getting a slight edge by betting the over on Underdog. Let's take a peek at it. So the only hesitation we would have would be looking at the opponent per minute production times his projected minutes. That's about it. It'd be set at 41.65. So he'd be slightly under that on Underdog and would definitely be under that on PrizePicks. Remember, Underdog's line is set at 42.65, but that's the only metric that we have here that would suggest he'd be under. And so this could very well be a situation in which we are taking the differences on Underdog and just betting the over here, because once again, these are the three biggest differences on PrizePicks compared to Underdog. And if we look at their projections, they're all projected to get slightly over this. Now, once again, none of these are locks. We did see that by looking at the average sportsbook odds and whatnot, but this is a situation in which at least we are kind of gaming the game here, finding the values here, and then using the projections to make an educated decision. This is a situation in which I typically like to bet on Underdog 3-leg bets. Basically the only thing I'll do on there. And then when I lose, I'll double it up. I'll do that each time. But really, I never force bets on Underdog, where on PrizePicks, to be honest, probably do a little bit too much. It's kind of a way in which I can game my game as well, whereas I'm never trying to force anything on Underdog, but it's really just 3-leg bets. If you guys want to make a 3-leg bet on Underdog and you haven't signed up yet, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of my video here, right here. And you can see the promo code. Pretty simple stuff there. So I am kind of curious here. Let's try this new kind of prop tool that I've been working on updating and whatnot. I've kind of mentioned this in passing a couple times. I just want to see how it looks. And so this is kind of the issue that we get. So we're pulling in the averages odds, and for the over and under, we're pulling in the average odds there, and then pulling in the averages for what the line should be. And so this is actually extremely interesting. And I know his per 36 numbers would suggest the over, but very interesting here for Tyus Jones. So his PrizePicks line is set at 34.5. If we were to pull in what his line would be based off of the average sportsbook odds that we're getting, it would suggest that it should be at 30.7. We look at his projection, it suggests literally 30.7 there as well. So we are gaining a decent edge there. But now, why is PrizePicks giving us that line? Well, it's going to be because John Morant is still out and Steven Adams is still out. And so we do know games in which those two sit Tyus Jones does average about 36 fantasy points per 36. And we can see been a little bit hit or miss during that stretch. Now, literally just had a matchup against Dallas, and that was a matchup in which Dallas had their backups. So let's look at the game projected to be a close scoring game there as well. I would say, does Kyrie defense help or hurt someone like Tyus Jones game there? I would maybe say it helps him a little bit, but it is one of those situations in which he rarely does get 36 minutes. Okay, probably going to get right around 33 minutes. So that per 36 number that we were looking at might be a little bit too high. Now, he is coming in off of a poor night shooting. You guys kind of know my thoughts on that. It's like, typically speaking, a guy coming in off of a poor night shooting, much more likely to have a better night shooting the next night. And so to me, this does seem like a stay away, but definitely very interesting here. And guys, this is kind of the issue with pulling in lines like this. It's like, this is just what's going to naturally happen, especially when we're pulling blocks and steals and whatnot. It's going to favor the under, it seems like. Now, here's one in which we probably stay away from, just because all the lines pretty much seem to be suggesting very close. It does suggest under here for Trae Young as well. Let's see if there's any over bets. Interesting. So Clint Capella, based off of his props that we are getting, would suggest that his line should be at 33.14. Look at his projection set at 30. PrizePicks line has it set at 28.5. Just interesting there. Okay. And we could see based off the average odds would be about minus 143 to get the over fantasy score. And for what it's worth with Clint Capella, it's literally just a bet on the minutes. Okay. His minutes have been super sporadic lately. Okay. 21 against Boston. Weird. Okay. 29, 25, 34. Like, if we could lock in 34 minutes, we'd be great. We'd be happy with that, and we'd be locking him up. But it's because we haven't been able to predict the minutes that we are getting this strange prop line. And so I'll probably test out the favorable bets that we're getting based off of this board just to test it out. Once again, that is something that someone asked for, and I could do it, so I did it. And it's just an interesting thing to look at, I think. And so let's sort by edge. Alfred Sengun popping up there once again. And so, guys, if you've noticed, we haven't really been getting these props in which are an edge of 4 or more fantasy points. We haven't really been getting that. And so we got Jalen Green, Kevin Porter, Alfred Sengun. And I'm actually curious. Let's see as to why. Everything does suggest they should be slightly over that. Average minutes has been 24.3, projected at 29.5. And he is questionable, so we have to watch for that. But he has been getting more run recently. So, it does make sense. Rebounds have strangely been down the last, kind of 2 games. I guess 8's not too much, but 5, a little bit. But he made up for it with assists, block, and steals. So if we look at his prop line, we can see he has been getting over this quite a bit. And what's the biggest reason why? Well, I would say it's because of Kevin Porter and also Jalen Green. It's more or less he is able to get more run in these games because, 2 pretty, better players. Games are consistently staying a little bit closer. Thus, he's able to get the over fantasy points. A little bit more minutes, able to get the over fantasy points. So definitely an interesting one there against Boston. I wouldn't say it's a perfect matchup, but it makes sense why that one's popping up. And then we did see Kelly Olynyk. This is a very strange score as well. Fantasy score. Miami, his former team. Maybe there's a little bit of revenge narrative there. Probably not. But he's been crushing lately. And looking at the minutes have been consistently there, like about 30 per game. And the only game in which he didn't get 30 was an extreme blowout. And so obviously that's a big risk with Utah lately is the blowout risk. But as long as the minutes are there, he should be able to get over this fantasy score. I mean, he has consistently been over that quite a while. Look at the last game against Miami, 32. And so once again, the biggest risk with this is the potential for a blowout, but 7.5, that's really when I start to worry about a blowout. And so for me, this just seems too low. Then I did just want to call out some other props that we are getting. Now, there's a lot of injuries to Detroit. Okay, they're going to be without Alec Burks, Bogdanovich, Jaden Ivey. And so a lot of people are probably going to flock to Killian Hayes, which I'm not saying is a bad idea. I would say he's a little bit too hit or miss for me. Does get a good matchup going against Indy. So I could see maybe potentially doing a game stack here. And if you're doing that, you're doing Livers over, you're doing Ivy over. I'm not sure exactly what to do with James Wiseman, but we do know that Isaiah Stewart's out and Bagley's out. So that should mean that Wiseman is locked in to gain 30 minutes. Now, if he doesn't, that's going to be because Eugene gets a decent amount of run, and that's going to be because Jalen Duren gets a decent amount of run. I'm very curious as to the prop line, if we get one for Jalen Duren, as to what it would be for fantasy score, because that could be a situation in which we are doing it. I would say Duren and Wiseman's prop line should be about the same for fantasy score. But Wiseman here, we can see like if he would have got 30 minutes in that previous game, would have got the over. And so with Bagley out, maybe he does get, a little bit of an extended run in his rotation. Maybe 30 more seconds here or there, but that could add up. And then I want to call it Horton Tucker as well, guys. Horton Tucker's fantasy score line to me seems way too low. And yes, we do have news pending. Jordan Clarkson is currently questionable. He's missed his last 3 games. If he sits, and we can see this right here, Horton Tucker at 30.5 fantasy points would just be a standout play. Now, even if Jordan Clarkson does play, it does seem like Horton Tucker is being valued a little bit too low. He averages about 6.2 fantasy points more per 36 with Colin Sexton off the court. Okay, we could take that further and add in some other players to that sample size. We could take out Mike Conley, who's obviously with the Timberwolves. We could take out Malik Beasley, who's no longer with them as well. You know, these other guards as well. And he would average 40.9 fantasy points per 36 and would average about 7 more points, fantasy points per 36. Yes, it's a tough matchup with Miami, and this is a situation maybe we do a little bit of a game stack. Maybe we do Horton Tucker over fantasy points, Kelly Olynyk over fantasy points, because it seems too low for him. And once again, the projections here do not account for per 36 numbers just yet. And maybe it's too late in the season for me to add that in there. I don't know. I still want to try to add that in there. But if we were to look at just based off of his projected minutes of 30.4, so he's not going to get 36 minutes, it would suggest that's too low. Okay, I'm saying this is probably wrong. We're not adjusting for late season differences in the numbers. Okay, that's the issue here. I'd probably bet the over. And I would say it only becomes safer if Clarkson sits, because then Horton Tucker's moved to the point guard spot. And let's just take a peek at his minutes, 32, 30, 34. Those have been the last 3 games with Jordan Clarkson out. So hopefully we can get a little bit more run out of him. And it's not like he has been shooting the basketball well, don't get me wrong, but the shot attempts have been there, 14, 18, 24. We love that. But the assists and rebounds have been there as well. Been getting a steal or 2. So it does seem like a favorable one, even in a matchup against Miami. And while we're there talking about this, I find this number for Bam extremely interesting here. Yes, he gets a great matchup going against Utah. We know that. But his production with Kevin Love on the court is like highly alarming for Bam. Now we're getting a bigger sample size now. Okay, so we got at least 150 minutes going into the sample. In 150 minutes thus far with Kevin Love on the court with Bam, Kevin Love's been a little bit banged up here and there. Bam is averaging about 9.6 less points per 36 with Love on the court. Okay, so I bet the fantasy prop for Bam is suggesting the over. It is, but not by much. 1.7. That's not too crazy. So once again, this is not accounting for per 36 numbers like this. And that's the tough part. It's like they're always kind of unique. Like in most situations, we're looking at per 36 numbers with someone off the court. In this situation, we have noticed that Kevin Love has really been hurting Bam's production. And it makes sense. Kevin Love is a high usage rate player. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to get points. And so with that, it does take away from Bam a little bit. And so let's just say his projection here, which I'm fine with, 41.26. Let's do minus 9.6, which is that per 36 number. That would suggest that he should be under. Now, the matchup's great. Don't get me wrong. And so that's 45 minus 9.6 here. Still would suggest the under. Once again, that's with Kevin Love on the court. So if Kevin Love is ruled out randomly, then obviously we're not using this one. John Collins is still a prop that's popping up as, we could slightly do the over as well. Just interesting there. And so is Brook Lopez. Like, this is like the 3rd straight game in which they haven't really adjusted Brook Lopez's numbers. 31.5 fantasy points. He's been going off. And yes, due for a poor game. Let's see the news on Giannis. Is Giannis expected to play? Currently questionable. I would kind of expect him to sit, okay? No need to get him playing. Trying to rev up Chris Middleton's usage and whatnot as well. So if he were to sit, and this is something you could do right now, you could actually bet the over for Drew Holiday in a good matchup going against the Kings. You could bet the over for Chris Middleton, who actually had 34 minutes in the last game. That game was an OT game, so I think that's why, but, strong point per minute player. But it really seems like, regardless of if Giannis is active or not, Brook Lopez in this matchup against the Kings is too low of a fantasy score. And let's just say we get lucky again and Giannis is ruled out, well, then we are gaining a bigger edge here. We look at Brook Lopez's per 36 numbers with Giannis off the court, and he also has the most minutes with Giannis off the court. He averages 40.5 fantasy points per 36. This is a plus matchup going against the Kings. It'd be difficult not to like him. We look at Drew Holiday's minutes per 36, or production per 36, 46 fantasy points per 36. And so for Drew, it's about a 7.4 increase in fantasy points. And for Brooks, it's about a 3.7 bump. And so I don't mind the idea of running out a game stack. If this game is going to go the way that Vegas is predicting it, being a very high scoring game and being a very close scoring game, maybe we get lucky and this game goes into OT. So you could potentially do Drew over, you could do Chris over. Brook does seem like the standout prop line. You could also do Grayson Allen over fantasy points. He had a terrible night shooting last game. Just terrible. 2 for 9. And those He was 0 for 7, I think, prior to that. So finally started to make some, and then finally got the over. But he was terrible, okay? But he also averages about 29 fantasy points per 36. So sure, if Giannis plays, this stack is pretty much not going to hit. If Giannis sits, we are gaining a big edge with the props because I feel like these would all be bumped up. So I really don't mind the idea, but still, Brook Lopez either way is still too low. If Giannis is ruled out, it probably gets bumped up to 33.5. If Giannis is ruled out, Drew probably goes to 39. Chris probably goes to 37. They're probably giving them about a 2 bump. And now let's just look at some other odds that we are getting where we could bet the over or unders. Okay, so looking at it right now, we're not getting great over bets. And like even for Bam, I just don't want to touch Bam tonight. I just don't. With Kevin Love on the court, it just seems like a stay away. And so we're not really getting any good over bets. Under bet wise, we could do Harrison Barnes under 1.5 threes made. Let's see why. It's favored at minus 143. On the season, average is about 1.6. Seems like it's an opponent thing. Okay, so they're definitely favoring the under there. I don't know. I don't really like to mess with these small ones too much, but more times than not, we're going to bet at minus 143. It should hit. Horton Tucker just not touching. This is interesting for Clint Capella. Oh, that's fantasy score. Never mind. Here we go. Slight edge. So the average sportsbook line has Ant-Man of points, rebounds, and assists set at 37 at minus 121.5. Now he's projected to get slightly under it. If we round up, projected to be a push. So this is a situation in which if you want to trust the sportsbook line, we do see we are getting a slight edge there. You could do that. And now, yeah, these are all going to be fantasy score ones here. Interesting here. Harrison Barnes points as well. It makes sense. If he's not going to make that extra 3, then it makes sense for them to do the points under. So average sportsbook line has it as under at minus 120 of 14.5 points. Projected to get 14.7. PrizePicks line has it set at 15.5. That is a very nice edge that we are getting. I really don't mind that bet. And so if he does make that extra 3 that he's projected to get under, then obviously that would probably hit, right? So underdog, you guys already saw why I'm making this bet. I think it makes sense. It kind of correlates. And we'll have to check the Bucks props as well. But with that, you could bet the under. Harrison Barnes points 15.5. We can see this is really the best one that we are getting for non-fantasy score props. And then from there, my favorite bets. And guys, it's Monday. Monday has been my worst day. Literally only day in which I haven't made a profit. It's Monday, and it's bad. So I don't want to give a bad the day, although I feel much better about the bets that we are getting today than any other Monday yet. So if you guys want to use them, you can. But it is very much a situation in which we are making bets based off of projected information that we're going to get. So I like the over fantasy score for Horton Tucker, okay? Especially if we get news that he's going to be playing point guard again. That's highly appealing. And if Jordan Clarkson's out with Colin Sexton out, we know that's going to happen. Bam, yes, it's a great matchup, okay? But with Kevin Love there, has been getting under these fantasy scored here. So I bet the under there. Kelly Olynyk, one of the better props that we were getting on the day as well. 22.5 fantasy points. He's been crushing that. And it doesn't seem like this is really going to change. So I'd be fine with attacking this one. And yeah, sure, he's due for a bad game. I get that. Chris Paul, I should mention as well, this seems extremely low for him as well. You look at his per 36 numbers with Mikal Bridges off the court. He averages 43.6 fantasy points per 36, and he is someone that should get 36 minutes. I believe this game is projected to stay close. It is. So yeah, this, we could easily bet the over there as well. It does feel like we'd be forcing a little bit. I think 2 nights ago, this was at 35.5, which was really nice. And then once again, I think we could run out a potential stack here with the Bucks, like literally over for Drew, Chris, Brook, and Grayson Allen, or maybe 3 out of the 4. I like Brook the most there. Just seems way too low. But yes, he is also someone you could say is due for a bad game. He has been going off. We know that's not sustainable, so sure, could be due for a bad game as well. But that's all I have for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give a like and subscribe. Let's have a good slate. Happy Monday. Happy March Madness as well. I'm excited for the tournament, guys. It's really my favorite time of the year. Let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.